with a confession, a witness from a parishioner, someone who was a participant or a facilitator in the Sacred Ground, the National Church's Sacred Ground curriculum. Last year, 5 groups, as you know, about 50 people met once a month for 10 months to learn about race and their Christian faith. I myself was a participant, and Andrew Bridges was a facilitator, and he is our first confessor, sharing what he has learned about race and his own faith during this time of learning. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Matt. I grew up in Atlanta, and nearby was Stone Mountain, which was a fixture for family outings. It's famous for its massive carving of Confederate leaders on the side of the mountain, larger than Mount Rushmore. That carving was completed in 1972. I thought it was a beautiful carving. Also, I regularly drove past the Cherokee Country Club, a whites-only golf club, but never focused on the fact that it was on land of displaced Cherokees. Now, growing up in Atlanta, I met Lester Maddox and Martin Luther King in my youth. My mother was courageous and active in school desegregation, a supporter of Dr. King. My father supported Lester Maddox and disliked Dr. King. I took my mother's side and have always felt good about being on the right side of history. I thought I understood enough history. But in recent years, I've come to see how little and selective my knowledge of history was, in part because of the forces that have shaped our learning of history in our society. Growing up, I did not realize that the Georgia flag I grew up under was not the Georgia flag I was born under. The Confederate battle flag was put into the Georgia flag in response to the Supreme Court's desegregation decision. Nor did I notice in 1965, when Georgia purchased Stone Mountain to turn it into a state park, I didn't realize that it had purchased it from the family of the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, the modern Ku Klux Klan, and that the Klan had been established on top of that mountain, and that he had given the north face of the mountain to the United Daughters of the Confederacy for that memorial. And that carving was not finished until 1972. It was begun back in the 20s. But I only recently, and I'm talking about in the last 2 months, learned that the official opening of that state park as a Georgia state park surrounding that Confederate memorial came months after the park was really open to the people and years before the carving was finished. And it was opened on April 14th, 1965, the centenary of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. I grew up in the middle of all of this without knowing these details. These little details that tell the story more accurately than what I learned in any school books. The brave Southern writer Lillian Smith in the 1940s wrote about all of this very perceptively. And she called racism the dance that cripples the human spirit. That's all human spirits, not just the spirits of those whom we consider traditionally to be the victims of racism. We are all affected. We are all wounded by this. And she brilliantly called attention to the effect on us. Now, becoming beloved community's aim, the aim of the Sacred Ground program, has been to promote a healthy church and healthy communities to overcome these wounds. As a parish, we have a strong commitment to social justice, especially racial justice. Where do we begin? In Luke 4:23, Jesus addresses the proverb, "Physician, heal thyself." If we as a parish, if we as individuals seek to improve the world, we must take care of our own healing first. As they say on airplanes, put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. So healing is impossible without diagnosis, without knowing what is to be healed. And the sacred ground process was remarkable by revealing to me how little history I knew of other people's experiences, how complacent I was in that ignorance, and how harmful that complacency is. I grew up with obvious white-black racism in Atlanta, but I was hugely ignorant of the many other ways in which we as a society have accepted oppressions based on color, origin, or other factors. Joining with others with similar revelations by learning the history that sacred ground teaches us, sharing our sometimes very personal reflections on them, finding out what our part of the dance has been, and finding mutual support and strengthening our resolve to heal ourselves and the world. All of this has been literally a godsend. So the process has just begun. I certainly haven't yet learned enough. I haven't listened enough yet. I haven't paid enough attention to the dance and to the music of the racism that we encounter today as a legacy of our past. I haven't yet been healed enough, but this process has started thanks to Sacred Ground, which is the best church program I have seen in my life. I'm very grateful to the organizers, to the diocese, to the national church, and especially to those who joined me in both my small group and the facilitators group for helping make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for being willing to stand before your faith community and share. Thank you so much. It's always a good thing. It's exciting in this Lenten season to hear from people in the pews. I'm excited that it's Lent, a new season of introspection. I was passing by the young adult group on Monday night. They meet outside in the courtyard on Monday nights under the lights. And I said hi to them, and actually I said, "Hello, youngsters." But I think it was David Weller who said, "Are you excited about Lent?" And I said, "Does one get excited about Lent?" But maybe we should be excited about Lent, about going deeper, about growing, about becoming stronger, leaning into our faith. I'm excited and inspired by the people in this congregation. I'm excited about the preachers in this place, with Nikki in recovery. God bless her and God bless her healing. We've had amazing preachers stand up and help us, from Lily to Liz to Debbie to Michael to Rebecca. Wow. The sermons have been so good. I was disappointed to see my name on the schedule this week. It's been so inspiring. And sometimes it's a process of wonderment and frustration. I remember talking to Liz, and she said, "It's just not there. I don't have anything." And then she struggles with it on Saturday or Sunday morning. And she preaches that great sermon about it's not finished, about God's time, about Kairos, about sacred time, about learning together. And so Lent is about bringing our faith and our true experience, as Andrew just shared, to Kairos, to God's time. That's an inspiration. Real time, real history, real truth meets our faith and our hope, as Andrew was saying. Reality of the past meets a response in the present. Reality hopefully meets integrity. So Lent is that focused time, simultaneously to be real and to have integrity. The word confess, as it says in the bulletin, one of the definitions is to own or admit. To own or admit. And implied there in that admittance is perhaps reluctance or avoidance to face truth, right? We don't like ugly truth. We don't like negativity. We don't like bad things. No, not another war. That can't be real, with Ukrainians and Russians dying. I can't deal with that. No, not another variant. I'm exhausted. No, I'm not complicit in being racist. I'm a good person. I treat people with kindness, everybody. As Andrew said, healing is impossible without diagnosis. Impossible. Have you ever been afraid to go to the doctor because you thought something might be wrong? How irrational is that? And yet how natural is it to be afraid to learn? Sometimes when we're defensive, we deny what we think might be true. So Lent addresses the need, ultimately, hopefully, the holy desire to have the strength to face bad news, difficult news, painful reality, a diagnosis. Hence our collect, we are assaulted by many temptations and our human weakness, and yet, quote, God is mighty to save. God is mighty to salve. God is mighty to heal, right? Hence, Jesus in the wilderness holds on to that might in his own weakness. He claims his weakness. He is fully human, according to our doctrine, right? So he is fully weak, potentially. And so the clever trickster, Satan, a title meaning adversary, the force attempting to trick us into thinking we are not fully human ourselves. We see Jesus oppose those temptations, those illusions, with the three temptations. The first, the bread, when hungry. Now, to be human is to be hungry, and here he is fasting for 40 days. He is hungry. That's natural. But he sits with his hunger, his weakness. This is part of who he is. He learns from his weakness, right? He's not a denier. And the second, the promise of glory and self-secure power. It will be all yours, the tempter says. It will be all yours, the tempter echoes in Jesus' ego. You will never be insignificant, never in need. And Jesus, in prayer, with effort, with struggle, refuses. Only God is without insignificance. What happens when people like Vladimir Putin cannot accept diminishing significance? We know what happens. A powerful person's inability to be vulnerable, to acknowledge human weakness, leads to the suffering of others in so many ways, especially the vulnerable and the weak. And that is the third temptation, the false hope that we ourselves will be protected from vulnerability, from pain, from human regret. Jesus says, the angels are not here to save my body from pain. The angels are here to remind me that any suffering I experience, any fear, any regret, any frailty is shared by God in God's love. God is with me. God is with us. And we are reminded of the cross with the suffering body and soul of Christ upon it as testament to that and testament to our belief that that is not the end of the story. As Liz Miller reminded us, it is not finished. When Jesus says it is finished on the cross, that is a beginning, a new beginning. The wilderness story today prefigures the strength of Jesus, of his faith, that we are not finished, that indeed the diagnosis, the honesty, the confession, the truth leads us to the great truth, that God's love carries us so that we can participate in that love beyond our lives even. We are not finished. Martin Luther King knew this. God rest and celebrate his soul. That's why he could both tell the truth, the real horrors of racism, personal and systemic, and still somehow love his oppressors. Bishop Tutu knew this. God rest and celebrate his soul. When he set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to lift up the truth of the horrors of apartheid, the oppression based on race alone, reality and truth meets reconciliation and the possibility of redemption. Where did they find the might to both resist oppression and hate and inspire change? Where? In God, in Jesus. In the cross and the promise of resurrection, of a new hope, a new beginning. And that is where we find the might. I want to close today by echoing Debbie Thomas's sermon from Ash Wednesday, because many of us didn't hear that. She shared the powerful story of Sojourner Truth. Quickly, a review of the facts of her life. She was born in 1797 in New York, sold, therefore separated from her family, as was the norm. She came to be abused and raped by at least one owner. Her 5 children were born into slavery. After many years, she was promised her freedom at a certain time. At the last minute, the owner took it away. But she wasn't finished. She escaped. And she prayed to God and changed her name from Isabella Baumtree, I'm assuming her master's name, to Sojourner Truth. Because God called her at 45 years of age to tell her story, to travel, to sojourn. To sojourn and tell what? And tell what? The truth. So that healing could take place. Not to rage and hatred, justified, but the truth so that healing could take place. So that redemption could take place, so that reconciliation becomes possible. How could she do that? How could Martin Luther King do that? How could Bishop Tutu do that? By the grace of God. Only by the grace of God. Only by believing that this is not the end of the story. Only by walking through, sojourning through the truth in the name of a greater reality, a greater love. Emptying herself, kenosis, emptying herself of her experience. So to close, one final vignette about her life. She was in Indiana, about to speak in a townhouse, and a mob, the pernicious mob, formed and threatened to burn down the building if she spoke. She was warned by her friends and supporters. And what did she say? What did she say, Debbie?
And I will speak upon the ashes.
Then I will speak upon the ashes. Think of that the next time that you're afraid of facing the truth. Friends, think of that the next time you are tired in this battle to love in the name of Christ. Think of that the next time you are afraid someone will be offended or defensive or uncomfortable, including yourself, to speak the compassionate truth. Think of that as we move from Ash Wednesday through Lent to to the possibility of new life on Easter Sunday.